The phone's shrill ring tore me from sleep at 2:13 a.m., my heart lurching with the gut-punch certainty that something was terribly wrong. At 62, calls at this hour never bring good news, but hearing my grandson's voice, trembling with panic, confirmed my worst fears. "Grandma, it's Caleb," he whispered, his words jagged with fear. "I'm at the police station in Augusta. Derek threw me out, said I attacked him, and now they're holding me like I'm some kind of thug. Mom's on her shift, and I didn't know who else to call." The mention of Derek, my daughter-in-law's new boyfriend of barely 5 months, sent a cold spike through my chest. I'd never met him, but Caleb's hesitant mentions over our weekly calls had sketched a man who wielded his job as a county deputy like a club, always hinting at control. "Which station?" I asked, already out of bed, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Years as a district attorney had taught me to lock fear behind focus. "Tell me everything." "Augusta City Precinct on State Street," Caleb said, his voice cracking. "It started after Mom left for her shift at the hospital. Derek caught me on the phone with you and flipped out, said I can't talk to you without his say-so. He grabbed my phone, saw I'd been recording some of his rants, and lost it. Threw my stuff into the yard, told me to get out. When I said I had nowhere to go, he shoved me. I pushed back just to get free, and he fell against the porch railing. Now he's saying I assaulted him, and his cop friends just believed him." My jaw clenched. Caleb and I had built a lifeline of calls since my son, Andrew, died 6 years ago in a car accident. Those conversations were our tether, a way to keep Andrew's memory alive through stories and shared grief. That Derek thought he could sever it was infuriating. "I'm on my way," I said, pulling on a sweater and slacks. "It's a 2-hour drive from Concord. Don't say anything to anyone until I get there. If they push, tell them you're waiting for your grandmother." "Okay," he whispered, sounding smaller than his 17 years. "Please, hurry." As I hung up, a familiar resolve settled over me, the kind that had carried me through decades of prosecuting cases where power was misused. This wasn't just about Caleb being scared. It was about someone trying to bend the system I'd fought for to hurt my family. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal or fought to protect someone you love, you'll understand why I couldn't stay silent. Please subscribe to the channel and join me for more stories like mine. You're not alone in this. The drive from Concord to Augusta was a blur of dark highways and my own racing thoughts. I'd spent 30 years in courtrooms, dismantling lies and holding the guilty accountable. Derek, with his badge and his bravado, was about to learn that I wasn't just a grandmother with a soft spot for her grandson. The Augusta precinct loomed in the pre-dawn gloom, a squat, concrete building that looked more like a bunker than a beacon of justice. I parked, straightened my blazer, a navy one I kept for moments requiring authority, and walked inside. "I'm here for Caleb Thornton," I announced to the desk officer, my voice carrying the weight of countless opening statements. "My grandson was brought in earlier tonight." The officer, a young man with tired eyes, typed into his computer. "Thornton, yeah, he's in holding, juvenile charges, domestic disturbance, assault. You his guardian?" "I'm his grandmother, Eleanor Thornton, former district attorney for Merrimack County. I'd like to see him now." He blinked, clearly caught off guard by my title, and reached for the phone. "I'll need to check with Officer Daniels, he's handling it." As he dialed, I scanned the lobby. Scuffed linoleum, a bulletin board with faded community notices, the faint hum of fluorescent lights. It was a familiar scene from my career, but standing here as Caleb's advocate felt raw, personal. A man in his late 30s emerged from a side door, badge gleaming, clipboard in hand. Officer Daniels, I assumed, his stride too confident for 4 a.m. "Miss Thornton?" he began, his tone clipped. "You're here about the kid who assaulted Deputy Harris?" "That's Ms. Thornton," I corrected, my voice cool but sharp. "Former district attorney Eleanor Thornton. And I'm here about my grandson who's been falsely accused by a man he's known for 5 months with no witnesses to corroborate the claim." Daniels faltered, his clipboard lowering slightly. I wasn't aware of your background, ma'am. Deputy Harris said the kid got violent, pushed him during an argument. Did Deputy Harris mention why a 17-year-old was thrown out of his home at midnight? Or why my grandson has a visible bruise on his jaw, while Harris, I presume, has no documented injuries? Daniels shifted uncomfortably. I'll need to get the full report. Let me take you to the juvenile holding area. He led me through a security door, his earlier swagger replaced by a nervous edge. The precinct's interior was as grim as I'd expected. Gray walls, flickering lights, the faint smell of stale coffee. Officers glanced our way, sensing the shift in dynamics. Caleb's in a supervised room, he said, gesturing to a door with a small window. Not a cell, just a secure space. I'm familiar with juvenile protocols, I replied. I've prosecuted cases involving minors. I've also dismissed charges when police reports were flimsy or biased. Has Caleb received medical attention for his injury? He didn't ask, Daniel started. He's a minor in custody, I cut in, my tone slicing through his excuse. Your department is responsible for his welfare, not his ability to navigate procedure. He fumbled with his keys. I'll have medical check him after you speak. I'll speak with him privately, I said, stepping toward the door, unless you'd like to explain to your supervisor why you denied a minor access to his advocate. He opened the door without further argument. Caleb stood as I entered, his lanky frame tense, a purplish bruise blooming on his jaw. Grandma, he said, relief flooding his face. I crossed the room in 2 strides and hugged him, feeling the tremor in his shoulders. Are you okay? I asked, pulling back to inspect the bruise. He's fine, but his eyes flicked toward Daniels, betraying his unease. We'll talk alone, I told him, turning to Daniels, who lingered in the doorway. Officer Daniels is arranging medical attention and retrieving the case file. Once the door closed, Caleb's composure cracked. I didn't do it, Grandma, I swear, he's lying. I know, I said, guiding him to sit. Start from the beginning. Every detail.
Caleb explained how his mother, Rachel, had moved them to Augusta after meeting Derek at a hospital fundraiser. Her night shifts as an ER nurse left Caleb alone with Derek, who'd grown increasingly controlling. He checks my phone, sets curfews I can't keep with school, tells me who I can't talk to, Caleb said. Last week, he told Mom my calls with you were disruptive to family unity. She didn't argue, just said to give him time. My chest tightened. Rachel had been a devoted mother, but Andrew's death had left her vulnerable, searching for stability in ways that blinded her to red flags. What happened tonight? I pressed. He overheard me talking to you, Caleb said, got mad, said, you don't get to hide behind your grandmother's skirt anymore. Grabbed my phone, saw I'd recorded him yelling before, and went crazy, threw my backpack into the yard, said, you're out, kid, find somewhere else to sleep. I told him I had nowhere to go, and he shoved me toward the door. I pushed back to get away, and he tripped over the porch step. Next thing, his cop buddies show up, and he's telling them I attacked him. Do you still have the recordings? I asked. He took my phone, Caleb said, frustration tightening his voice. It's evidence now. Before I could respond, the door opened and a woman in medical scrubs entered, followed by Daniels. This is Dr. Patel, and Captain Larson wants to meet you, Miss Thornton. She's on her way. Medical attention first, I said firmly. Then I want Derek's statement, all reports, and Caleb's phone secured. I have reason to believe it contains evidence contradicting Deputy Harris's claims. As Dr. Patel examined Caleb's bruise, noting it was consistent with a strike rather than a defensive injury, I felt a spark of satisfaction. This was the first concrete step toward dismantling Derek's lies. By the time we moved to Captain Larson's office, I was ready to leverage every ounce of my legal experience. Captain Sarah Larson stood as I entered, her handshake firm, her expression professional but guarded. Miss Thornton, I understand you're here about your grandson. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances.
I'm concerned about why a minor is being held on a deputy's word alone. No witnesses, no documented injuries to the accuser, and visible evidence of physical harm to my grandson." Larson nodded, opening a file. "Deputy Harris claims Caleb became aggressive after being asked to leave the premises for breaking rules. He says Caleb pushed him, causing a minor injury." "And the evidence?" I asked, beyond Harris's statement. Larson hesitated. "The initial report notes no visible injuries on Harris. The responding officers acted on his account as a fellow deputy. So professional courtesy trumped due process?" I said, my tone measured but pointed. "My grandson has a bruise from being struck, documented by your medical staff, and there's a phone, seized as evidence, that I believe contains recordings proving Harris's aggression." Larson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Recordings?" I said, "Caleb documented Harris's behavior for weeks. Harris discovered this tonight, which triggered his outburst. I want that phone examined under proper chain of custody." Larson picked up her phone. "Daniels, bring the evidence bag with the juvenile's phone to my office, now." She turned back to me. "If these recordings exist, they could change the nature of this case." When Caleb joined us, still pale but steadier, he unlocked his phone and navigated to a hidden app disguised as a weather widget. He said, "I started recording after he threw my books across the room for missing curfew," pulling up a file labeled 10/12/2025. The recording captured Derek's voice, low and menacing. "You think you can defy me in my own house? I'm the law here, kid." Caleb's voice, trying to stay calm, "I'm just talking to my grandma." Then a sharp slap, a gasp, and Derek's snarl, "Keep recording and you'll see what happens to snitches." Larson stopped the replayback, her face tight with contained anger. "This directly contradicts Harris's report." "Indeed," I said, resting a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "I want him released into my custody immediately, and I expect a full investigation into Harris's conduct." Larson nodded to Daniels. "Process his release. Contact Internal Affairs for an 8 a.m. meeting." To me, she added, "This isn't over. Harris has connections in the department. He'll push back." "I'm counting on it," I replied, my voice steady. "Some people need to learn the system isn't their personal shield." Dawn broke as Caleb and I left the precinct, the early light casting long shadows across the lot. He clutched his backpack, his jacket too light for the October chill. "We need to call your mom," I said, starting the car. "Her shift should be over soon." "She'll take his side," Caleb muttered, staring out the window, his profile so like Andrew's it stole my breath. "She needs to know you're safe," I said. Dialing Rachel's number, it went to voicemail. "Rachel, it's Eleanor. Caleb's with me. There was an incident with Derek. He was taken to the police station, but is safe now. I'm bringing him to Concord. Call me when you get this." Caleb's silence stretched as we drove, the weight of betrayal heavy between us. At a diner near the state line, over pancakes and coffee, he finally spoke. "What happens now?" I said, "You stay with me for now. The recordings and your bruise give us leverage. Captain Larson's investigating Derek, and we'll sort out school and custody. Will I have to go back?" His voice was small, fear edging through his usual stoicism. "Not if you don't want to," I assured him. "At 17, your wishes carry weight in court, and I'm not letting Derek near you again." By the time we reached my Concord home, a colonial I'd bought when Andrew was young, the morning sun warmed the porch. Caleb's room, filled with books and posters from weekend visits, felt like a sanctuary. "Rest," I told him. "We'll talk school later."
As he disappeared upstairs, I called my old colleague, Susan Grant, a family law attorney. "Eleanor, this is a surprise," she said warmly. "What's the trouble?" I outlined the night's events, emphasizing the recordings and Derek's false report. "We have grounds for an emergency custody petition," Susan said. "The evidence is strong, especially with your reputation, but Rachel's consent would make this smoother." "She's still processing," I said. I want to avoid a fight, but Caleb's safety comes first. File the petition as a precaution, Susan advised. It gives you leverage if Derek tries anything. That afternoon, Rachel's call came as I chopped vegetables for dinner. Eleanor, what's going on? Her voice was frayed, exhaustion mixing with panic. Derek says Caleb provoked him, attacked him. Caleb has a bruise from Derek's hand, I said, keeping my tone firm but calm. There are recordings, Rachel. He threatened Caleb and lied to the police. Caleb's staying with me until this is resolved. You can't just take him, she protested, her voice rising. I'm protecting him, I countered. Come to Concord, see him, but he's not going back to a house where Derek is. Silence stretched, then her voice softened. I'm coming tomorrow. I need to see him. The next morning, Rachel arrived in her scrubs, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. Where's Caleb? She asked, stepping inside. Upstairs, sleeping. He's shaken, Rachel. Derek crossed a line. He says Caleb's been lying, manipulating you, she said, her voice wavering. Come with me, I said, leading her to my study. I played the recording from Caleb's phone, Derek's voice cutting through the room. You think you're clever recording me? I'll show you what happens to kids who cross me. Rachel flinched at the sound of the slap. He hit him, she whispered, her face crumpling. I didn't know. You weren't there, I said gently, but Caleb tried to tell you. She sank into a chair, tears spilling. I thought Derek was good for us. After Andrew, I just wanted stability. I know, but stability can't come at Caleb's expense. She stayed for an hour, seeing Caleb briefly as he woke. Their conversation was quiet, cautious, but when she left for a hotel in Concord, she promised to return. I'm not going back to Derek, she said, her voice firmer. I need to figure this out. Over the next week, Caleb settled into my home, his anxiety easing as we reestablished routines. I contacted his old school, Concord High, to arrange his return. I want to go back, he said one evening, helping me cook. Augusta never felt right. We'll make it happen, I promised, noting the spark of hope in his eyes. Captain Larson called with an update. Harris is on leave, she said. We found other complaints, 2 domestic calls from past relationships, swept under the rug. He's fighting the allegations, claiming Caleb set him up. He can claim what he wants. The recordings don't lie. Life found a rhythm. School meetings, dinners with Caleb, calls with Susan to draft custody papers. Rachel visited daily, her resolve growing. One evening, she announced she'd requested a transfer to Concord Hospital. I'm done with Derek, she said. I've hired movers to get my things from Augusta. Caleb's relief was palpable, but his question cut deep. Will she stick to it? She's trying, I said. Leaving someone like Derek takes time, but she's taking steps. At the custody hearing in Merrimack County Family Court, Judge Limba Hayes presided, her no-nonsense demeanor reassuring. Susan presented our case, joint custody with me as primary guardian until Rachel was settled in Concord. Rachel agreed, her voice steady as she addressed the judge. I want Caleb safe with Eleanor while I rebuild in Concord. The judge turned to Caleb. What do you want, young man? I want to stay with Grandma and see Mom when she's ready. The judge nodded. The court grants joint legal custody with primary physical placement with Eleanor Thornton until August 1st, transitioning to shared custody thereafter. The restraining order against Derek Harris remains in effect. As we left the courtroom, Caleb's shoulders relaxed, the weight of uncertainty lifting. Rachel hugged him tightly, whispering, I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. Spring turned to summer, and our family found a new balance. Caleb thrived at Concord High, Rachel settled into her new job, and I adapted to the chaos of parenting a teenager again. One July evening, we hosted a barbecue. Rachel, Caleb, my daughter Ellison from Montreal, and me. Laughter filled the backyard, a stark contrast to the tension of months past. As we cleared plates,
Caleb grinned, tossing a frisbee to Alyssa. Rachel caught my eye, her smile tentative but genuine. "We're going to be okay," she said softly. Later, alone in my study, I looked at a photo from Caleb's 10th birthday. Andrew's absence, a quiet ache, but the resilience in Caleb's face, Rachel's determination, and our shared laughter tonight told a different story of healing, of bonds tested and strengthened. If you've ever faced betrayal or fought for someone you love, share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel to hear more stories like mine. We're stronger together, one day at a time.